The knock on my door came at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday, sharp and authoritative. I was in my home office reviewing acquisition reports for my real estate portfolio when I heard Dad's voice through the door. "Emma, we need to talk. Open up." I set down my coffee and walked to the front door of my apartment, already knowing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. My parents had been increasingly frustrated with me over the past few months, ever since I'd stopped pretending that my freelance marketing work was anything more than a cover story. I opened the door to find both my parents standing in the hallway, Mom clutching a manila envelope and Dad wearing the expression he'd perfected during his 30 years as a high school principal. "Good morning," I said. "Emma, we need to discuss your living situation," Dad said without preamble, brushing past me into my apartment. Mom followed, her face a mixture of disappointment and determination. "Honey, this is very difficult for us." I closed the door and turned to face them. "What's going on?" Dad pulled a document from the envelope Mom was holding. "These are eviction papers. You're 3 months behind on rent and we can't continue to subsidize your lifestyle." I took the papers and read through them carefully. Standard eviction notice for non-payment of rent. 3 months behind as stated. Total amount due, $4,200. "You're right," I said calmly. Both my parents looked surprised by my reaction. "You're not going to argue?" Mom asked. "About what?" "The papers are accurate." What they didn't know was that I hadn't been paying rent to them because I'd been paying it to myself. Last week I'd completed the purchase of the entire building through one of my holding companies. The previous landlord, Mr. Patterson, had been eager to sell after managing the property for 15 years. My parents were now my tenants, though they didn't know it yet. "Emma," Dad continued, "your mother and I have been more than patient. We've let you live here for practically nothing, hoping you'd get your act together and find a stable career. Instead of that computer nonsense," Mom added helpfully. The computer nonsense was actually Meridian Digital, a marketing automation company that generated $73 million in annual revenue and employed 180 people across 3 states. But my parents saw it as me playing around on the internet, instead of getting what Dad called a real job with benefits. "We love you," Mom said, tears starting to form in her eyes, "but enabling you isn't helping you grow up." I looked around my apartment, the same space I'd been living in for 4 years while building my business empire. My parents had no idea that their struggling daughter had just purchased not only this building, but 6 others in the downtown area. "So what happens now?" I asked. "You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live," Dad said firmly. "We should have done this years ago. And if I can't find another place? Then you'll have to move back home with us until you figure out your life." Move back home. At 28 with a net worth of $47 million, they wanted me to move back into my childhood bedroom because they thought I couldn't afford my own rent. "I understand," I said. Dad looked relieved that I wasn't fighting the decision. "Emma, this is for your own good. Sometimes people need a push to reach their potential." "You're probably right." Mom stepped forward and hugged me. "We're not abandoning you, sweetheart. We're trying to help you become independent." Independent. If only they knew that I'd been financially independent since I was 24, and that I'd been quietly helping them with their own financial struggles for the past 2 years. The property taxes they thought they'd caught up on through good budgeting? That was me paying them through a shell company. The lucky break they'd gotten on their car repairs last year? Also me anonymously covering the costs. "Can I ask you something?" I said as they were preparing to leave. "Of course," Mom said. "When was the last time either of you asked me how my business was really doing?" Dad frowned. "Emma, we've talked about your computer work plenty of times. When have you asked about my revenue, my growth projections, my client base, my employee count? Because those aren't real metrics for freelance work," Dad said dismissively. "You can't build a career on Instagram posts and website design." I almost laughed. Instagram posts and website design. Dad had no idea that my company had just signed a $12 million contract with a Fortune 100 retailer to automate their entire customer acquisition process. "So you've never been curious about the specifics of what I do?" "Honey," Mom said gently, "we know you try hard, but at some point you need to face reality." "What reality is that?" "That you're 28 years old, living in a subsidized apartment, with no savings and no stable income." I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me and loved me, and completely failed to see what I'd become. Hey, I said. I'll start looking for a new place. After they left, I sat in my kitchen and called my property manager, James Rodriguez. James, it's Emma. I need you to prepare some paperwork. What kind of paperwork? Eviction notices for Thomas and Linda Carter, Unit 4B at Riverside Gardens. There was a pause. Emma, those are your parents. I'm aware. You want me to evict your own parents? I want you to prepare standard eviction notices for tenants who are habitually late with rent payments and have been disruptive to building management. This was technically true. My parents had been late with their rent 7 times in the past 18 months, and they'd complained to the previous landlord constantly about building maintenance, other tenants, and neighborhood noise levels. What's the grounds for eviction? Lease violations, noise complaints from other tenants, and they've been subletting part of their apartment without permission. This was also true. My Uncle Mike had been staying in their spare bedroom for 6 months, paying them cash that they'd never reported to the landlord. Emma, are you sure about this? James, they just served me eviction papers because they think I can't afford to pay my own rent. I think it's time they learned what actual property management looks like. When do you want the notices delivered? Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp. The next morning I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when James called. The notices have been delivered, he said. How did they react? Your father answered the door. He seemed confused at first, then angry. He kept saying there must be some mistake. Did you explain the grounds for eviction? I tried to, but he demanded to speak to the building owner. What did you tell him? That the owner prefers to handle tenant communications through property management. Good. Emma, your mother was crying. Are you sure you want to do this to them? I looked out my office window at the city skyline, at the buildings I'd helped develop and the businesses I'd helped grow. James, my parents just tried to evict me because they think I'm a failure. They're about to learn that their failure daughter owns their building. And then what? Then we'll see if they're more interested in having a relationship with me or with maintaining their assumptions about me. At 9:15 a.m. my phone rang. Emma, something insane is happening. What's wrong, Dad? We got eviction papers this morning. Some property management company is claiming we violated our lease. That sounds serious. It's ridiculous. We've been model tenants for 8 years. There must be some mistake. What are the grounds for eviction? Late rent payments, noise complaints, and unauthorized subletting. But Emma, we've only been late a few times and Uncle Mike isn't subletting. He's just staying with us temporarily. Temporarily for 6 months? How did you know it's been 6 months? I realized I'd revealed more than I intended. Lucky guess. What are you going to do? We're going to fight this. I called a lawyer and he says we have rights as tenants. Probably a good idea to get legal advice. Emma, can you believe this timing? We just had to evict you yesterday and now we're getting evicted ourselves. Ironic. The property management company says the new building owner is taking a harder line on lease violations. Apparently, the building was sold recently. Do you know who bought it? Some investment company. Meridian Holdings or something like that. Meridian Holdings was one of my shell companies. I'd purchased the building under that name to maintain privacy. Dad, maybe you should just talk to the new owner directly. We tried. The property manager says the owner doesn't deal with tenants personally. That seems unreasonable. Exactly. What kind of person buys a building and then immediately starts evicting long-term tenants? I almost said, the kind of person whose parents just evicted her for being 3 months behind on rent. But I managed to restrain myself. Maybe if you explain your situation to the owner, they'll be understanding. How can we explain anything if they won't take meetings? I don't know, Dad. Maybe write a letter. At noon Mom called. Emma, we're in crisis mode here. This eviction notice is a nightmare. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. We've been trying to reach the building owner all morning but they won't talk to us. We don't know what we did wrong. The notice mentioned late rent payments. We've been late a few times but we always catch up. And it's not like we're terrible tenants. We keep the apartment clean, we don't throw parties, we report maintenance issues properly. What about Uncle Mike? What about him? The notice mentioned unauthorized subletting. He's not a subletter. He's family going through a difficult time. We're helping him get back on his feet. For 6 months. Emma, whose side are you on? The question hung in the air for a moment. Mom, I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just trying to understand the situation. The situation is that some heartless investor bought our building and decided to kick out the long-term tenants to raise the rent. Heartless investor. If only she knew that the heartless investor was her daughter, who had actually been subsidizing their below-market rent for years. Maybe the new owner has expenses you don't know about, I suggested. Whose expenses could possibly justify evicting people who've lived somewhere for 8 years? Building maintenance, property taxes, insurance, mortgage payments. Emma, you sound like you're defending them. I'm just saying there might be more to the story. There's nothing more to the story. This is pure greed and we're not going to stand for it. That evening, I received an email from James with photos attached. Mom and Dad had organized the other tenants to create protest signs and were planning to picket outside the building's management office. One sign read, Meridian Holdings, Greedy Landlords. Another said, 8 years of perfect tenancy equals eviction notice. I was looking at the photos when my phone rang. It was my business partner and best friend, Sarah. Emma, I heard about the eviction situation. Are you really going through with this? Going through with what? Evicting your own parents. They evicted me first. That's different and you know it. Is it? They served me legal papers because they thought I couldn't afford my rent. Now they're facing legal papers because they've actually violated their lease terms. Emma, they're your parents. Parents who think their 28-year-old daughter is a failure living off their charity. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What do you want to accomplish here? I looked around my apartment at the space my parents thought they owned in the building I'd just purchased. I want them to understand that their assumptions about me have consequences. And after they understand? I don't know yet. Emma, you could destroy your relationship with them over this. Sarah, what relationship? They think I'm an unemployed loser who can't pay her own bills. They've spent 4 years treating me like a charity case instead of asking who I really am. So show them who you really are. I tried that. They dismissed my business as computer nonsense and decided I needed to be evicted for my own good. And now they get to experience what it feels like when someone makes decisions about their housing situation without consulting them. The next morning, James called with an update. Your parents hired a lawyer, he said. I expected that. They're demanding a meeting with the building owner to discuss their eviction. What did you tell them? That Meridian Holdings doesn't typically take meetings with individual tenants. And they said they're prepared to take this to court if necessary. I almost smiled. Dad had always been a fighter when he thought he was in the right. James, set up a meeting for Monday morning. 10 a.m. You'll meet with them? Yes, but don't tell them who the owner is. Just say that Meridian Holdings has agreed to hear their case. Emma, are you sure about this? I'm sure. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I dressed in my best business suit, the one I'd worn for the Forbes photoshoot that my parents had never seen, and arrived at our property management office 15 minutes early. James had set up the conference room with water and coffee. At exactly 10 a.m. he escorted my parents and their lawyer into the room. Dad stopped short when he saw me sitting at the head of the conference table. Emma, what are you doing here? I'm here for the meeting you requested with the building owner. Mom looked confused. Honey, we're meeting with the owner of Meridian Holdings. That's right. The lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, stepped forward. Ms. Carter, I think there's been some confusion. We're here to meet with the property owner about my client's eviction notice. There's no confusion, I said calmly. Please, everyone sit down. Dad remained standing. Emma, there's obviously been some mistake. We need to meet with whoever owns our building. You are meeting with whoever owns your building. The room went silent. That's impossible, Mom whispered. I opened the folder in front of me and pulled out the property deed. Meridian Holdings purchased the Riverside Gardens apartment complex on March 15th of this year. I am the sole owner of Meridian Holdings. Dad sank into a chair. You own our building? I own your building, Mom and Dad's building, and 6 others in this neighborhood. But you're 3 months behind on rent, Mom said weakly. I'm 3 months behind on rent because I've been paying rent to myself since I bought the building, and it seemed unnecessarily complicated to process those payments. The lawyer was looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. "Emma," Dad said slowly, "how could you possibly afford to buy an entire apartment building?" I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, then slid it across the table. $47 million, the lawyer read aloud. "Liquid assets," I clarified. "The property holdings are separate." Mom was staring at the phone like it was a foreign object. "Emma, this can't be real." "It's real, Mom. My computer nonsense company generated $73 million in revenue last year." $73 million? Dad's voice cracked. "We're expanding into artificial intelligence and machine learning. I have meetings with Google and Microsoft scheduled for next month." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "So," the lawyer finally said, "about the eviction notice." I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me and loved me and completely misjudged what I'd become. "The eviction notice stands," I said. "Emma." Mom gasped. "Unless," I continued, "the tenants in question can demonstrate that they've learned something from this experience." "What kind of demonstration?" Dad asked quietly. "An acknowledgement that making assumptions about people without bothering to learn the facts has consequences." "We know you're successful now," Mom said. "Do you? Or are you just processing the shock of finding out your failure daughter owns your building?" Dad leaned forward. "Emma, what do you want us to say?" "I want you to tell me what you've learned." "We've learned that we don't know our daughter as well as we thought we did. And that we made assumptions about your life without asking you about your reality." "What else?" Mom spoke up. "We've learned that trying to evict someone for not meeting our expectations is complicated." "How so?" "Because the person you're evicting might be the person who actually has the power in the situation." I looked at them both, these flawed human people who had just received the shock of their lives. "The eviction notice is rescinded," I said finally. "Really?" Mom started crying with relief. "But there are new lease terms." "What kind of terms?" the lawyer asked. "First, no more complaints to building management unless there are genuine safety issues. Second, Uncle Mike needs to be added to the lease officially or find other housing arrangements. Third, rent is now due on the first of the month with no grace period. And fourth," Dad asked, "Sunday dinner once a month. Here in my apartment, where we talk honestly about our lives without anyone making assumptions about anyone else's situation." Dad stood up and walked around the table to where I was sitting. "Emma, I'm proud of you. Not just for your success but for teaching us something we clearly needed to learn." "What's that?" "That love means paying attention to who people actually are instead of who we think they should be." As I hugged my parents in the conference room of the building I owned, I realized that sometimes the most valuable property you can acquire isn't real estate. Sometimes it's the real relationship with the people you love, built on a foundation of truth instead of assumptions. The eviction notice had been rescinded, but the education was permanent.
"Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Collins." "Sign it or lose everything," Eleanor said, sliding the transfer papers across the table with a venomous smirk. Behind her, Rebecca casually flipped through a stack of cash, her painted nails skimming over the inheritance my grandfather had left me, like it was already hers. I never imagined I'd end up here, cornered in my own home, watching my mother-in-law and sister-in-law scheme to rob me blind. The inheritance wasn't theirs to touch. It wasn't even Thomas's. It was mine. Grandpa Jack left it to me, his little owl, because he trusted me to protect what he had built after my parents died. Eleanor's voice sliced through my spiraling thoughts. "This can go smoothly, Olivia, or it can go very badly, for you and Thomas." Her manicured fingers tapped a rhythm on the polished mahogany, a sound that had grated on my nerves for years. I forced myself to keep calm, my eyes flicking to the documents. This wasn't just $2.8 million. It was my future, my independence. "I don't understand," I said evenly. "Why do you think you're entitled to this? Grandpa Jack left this to me." Rebecca scoffed, her laugh sharp and cruel. "Oh, don't play innocent. You probably manipulated that poor old man into rewriting his will. Everyone knows he wasn't in his right mind at the end." My chest tightened with fury. "Don't you dare." Grandpa Jack was sharper than anyone I've ever known, right up to the day he passed. "You don't get to rewrite history just because it suits you." I turned to Eleanor, my voice firm. "And you met him. You know exactly the kind of man he was." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. Regardless, Rebecca's in the middle of a very messy divorce. She needs security. As family, you should be willing to help. Family. The word left a bitter taste in my mouth. In Eleanor's eyes, I'd never been part of their family. Not really. I was the kindergarten teacher from the wrong side of town. The woman who'd stolen her precious Thomas away from the society debutantes she deemed worthy. Where's Thomas? I asked, the realization hitting me that he wasn't here. Does he know about this? Eleanor's predatory smile widened. Thomas understands that family comes first. He agrees this is the best course of action for everyone involved. The words hit like a punch to the gut. He agreed? Without even telling me? I had such high hopes for you, Olivia. Eleanor sighed, feigning disappointment. But your refusal to support Rebecca in her time of need proves what I've always suspected. You don't belong in this family. Rebecca stepped closer, her hands gripping my shoulders with unsettling force. Sign the papers, Liv. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I stared at the documents, Eleanor's smug face blurring as anger and betrayal clouded my vision. This wasn't just greed, it was control. Eleanor had spent years trying to undermine me, and now she thought she found the perfect way to force me out for good. And if I refuse? I asked quietly, already anticipating the answer. Eleanor leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Then I'll have no choice but to share some interesting discoveries about your teaching credentials. It would be a shame if the school board received an anonymous tip. My head snapped up. That's a lie. My credentials are flawless. I earned every inch of my degree. Perhaps, she replied, her tone syrupy sweet. But in the digital age, it's so easy to create discrepancies. And with my connections, I doubt you get the benefit of the doubt. Rebecca resumed her humming, counting cash with theatrical glee. Think of it as an investment in family harmony, she chirped. I clenched my fists under the table, my grandfather's voice echoing in my memory. Always stand your ground, little owl. Don't let anyone push you around. But this wasn't just about standing my ground. I needed to be smart, strategic. They'd always underestimated me, the quiet kindergarten teacher who didn't belong in their world of old money and power plays. My fingers curled around the pen, steadying as an idea began to form. Let them think they'd won. Slowly, deliberately, I signed the papers. Eleanor's triumph was palpable as she snatched them back. See? That wasn't so hard, was it? She cooed. Rebecca beamed, clutching the briefcase full of cash like it was a prize. They left without a backward glance, too busy celebrating to notice the faint glint of metal at my collar. My grandmother's brooch, worn to every family meeting, hadn't just been an heirloom. It was a recording device. Eleanor and Rebecca thought this was the end of the game. They had no idea it was only the beginning. The next few weeks were a masterclass in patience. While Eleanor and Rebecca paraded their victory like peacocks, I perfected my role as the docile, defeated daughter-in-law. But beneath the surface, I was methodically setting the pieces into place. I can't believe how calm you are about this, Lisa, my best friend, said as we sat in our favorite cafe. Her voice carried a mix of outrage and disbelief. They stole your inheritance, Olivia. $2.8 million. I stirred my latte slowly, watching the foam swirl. Remember when I told you my grandfather was just a simple accountant? I said, my voice quiet but firm. That wasn't entirely true. Before his retirement, Grandpa Jack had been a forensic accountant for the FBI, specializing in exposing financial fraud. Growing up, he made it our special game. While other kids played tag, I learned to follow money trails, uncover irregularities, and piece together hidden schemes. The money was never the endgame, Lisa, I explained, setting my cup down. It was the bait. I opened my laptop, revealing a digital vault of evidence I'd been compiling for years. Every suspicious transaction from Eleanor's real estate firm, every shady property deal, every blatant instance of tax evasion, all meticulously documented. The recording of them threatening me was just the final piece. I continued scrolling through files. But this is the real weapon. The next day, I visited James Morton, one of Grandpa Jack's old colleagues and now a senior partner at Sterling and Morton Law. He smiled as I walked in, pulling a thick envelope from his desk drawer. Your grandfather asked me to hold on to these until you needed them, he said, sliding it across the polished wood. Inside was the crown jewel of evidence, a detailed web of Eleanor's most intricate schemes. Shell companies, money laundering, and fraudulent real estate transactions, painstakingly documented by my grandfather over the years. "There's one more thing," James said, handing me a USB drive. "He left this too. Said you'd know what to do when the time came." That evening, Thomas finally broached the subject of my attitude since signing over the inheritance. "Mom says you've been cold at family dinners," he started, his tone accusatory. "Can't you just appreciate that we're helping Rebecca through a tough time?" I studied my husband carefully, feeling a pang of pity more than anger. "Tell me, Thomas," I asked, my voice steady. "Did you even hesitate when your mother suggested taking my inheritance? Did you think about me at all?" His silence said everything. The next morning, I booked a meeting with Eleanor's fiercest rival, Victoria Kane. For years, Victoria had tried to expose Eleanor's fraudulent dealings, but she never had enough evidence. Victoria's eyes widened as she reviewed the files I brought. "This is staggering," she breathed. "With this, we cold." "Destroy her," I finished, cutting her off. "But that's not the goal. Not yet." I outlined my plan, watching as Victoria's smile grew with each detail. By the time I left her office, we had a pact that would change the game entirely. Sunday dinner arrived and Eleanor was in rare form. She gloated about Rebecca's new car, bought with my inheritance, as Rebecca grinned smugly. "Oh, Olivia," Rebecca said sweetly, "I thought you'd like to know. I'm using some of the money to open a press school. Isn't that perfect? We'll practically be colleagues." The irony nearly made me laugh. They still saw me as the naive kindergarten teacher, blissfully unaware of their games. They had no idea what tomorrow would bring. As I helped Eleanor with the dishes, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law one final time, she patted my head condescendingly. "See, Olivia? This is what family harmony looks like. Things are so much better when you cooperate." I dried the last plate and smiled faintly, my voice even. "You're right, Eleanor. Everything is exactly as it should be." Walking home that night, I checked my phone. A message from Victoria awaited. "Everything's ready. Operation Karma starts tomorrow." I thought of Grandpa Jack, his words echoing in my mind. The best revenge is letting them think they've won, until the moment they realize they've lost everything. Tomorrow, Eleanor and Rebecca would finally learn who I truly was, not just a kindergarten teacher, but my grandfather's heir in every way that mattered. I typed one word back to Victoria: begin. Monday morning arrived with thunderclouds, an omen, perhaps, for what was about to unfold. I sat in Victoria Kane's office, eyes fixed on the screens as our carefully laid plan came to life. Channel 7 news breaking story. Major fraud investigation launched into Collins' real estate empire. The anchor announced. Anonymous sources have provided evidence of extensive money laundering and tax evasion. My phone lit up with notifications. Thomas's name appeared 6 times in a row. I ignored every call. "They've arrived," Victoria said, nodding toward the security feed. Eleanor and Rebecca stormed into the Collins real estate lobby, their faces pale and frantic. Minutes later, every local news station aired the recording of their inheritance extortion, blasting their threats for the world to hear. "This is only the beginning," I murmured, my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind. "Time for phase 2. Victoria picked up her phone and made the call we'd rehearsed for weeks. Within hours, her company announced a hostile takeover of Collins' real estate, fortified by the mountain of evidence we provided. Stock prices plummeted, dragging Eleanor's carefully curated empire down with them. Eleanor's call came exactly when I expected. "What have you done?" she screeched, her voice shrill with desperation. "You vindictive little—" "Me?" I interrupted, calm and measured. "I'm just a kindergarten teacher, remember? But you might want to ask Rebecca about those shell companies she's been managing for you, the ones in her name." The line went silent. Then, barely a whisper, "How did you?" "My grandfather taught me well," I said, my tone like steel. "And as for the inheritance you coerced me into signing over, it's being returned with interest. Fraud under duress doesn't hold up well in court, especially with recorded proof." Rebecca's meltdown on social media was almost theatrical. "You ruined everything," she raged in a post. "We were trying to help you fit in." I replied with a single line: "Karma sends her regards." By evening, Thomas came storming into the house, waving papers. "The company's gone. Mom's being investigated." What did you do? I handed him a manila envelope. Divorce papers. I figured while the lawyers were already busy, we might as well make it official. His face crumpled. But I love you. No, Thomas, I said, my voice cold. You loved having someone your mother could control. That person doesn't exist anymore. The aftermath was swift. Eleanor's empire crumbled in weeks. Rebecca's divorce settlement was reopened when her fraudulent finances were exposed. And Thomas? He learned too late what it meant to bet on the wrong team. 6 months later, I stood in my new office at Kane and Collins Real Estate. Victoria's insistence on the partnership had been non-negotiable. Above my desk hung 2 frames, my grandfather's photo and my teaching degree. I still kept my kindergarten job. Some battles were worth fighting, but so were the simple joys. Miss Collins, my assistant called from the door. Your 2 o'clock is here. Something about discussing terms? Eleanor stepped in, unrecognizable in her plain attire. No designer suits, no sparkling diamonds, just a woman stripped of the power she once wielded. Olivia, she began, her voice trembling. I've come to beg. No need, I interrupted, folding my hands on the desk. The terms are simple. Admit everything, return every penny you stole, and I'll ensure you avoid jail time. I smiled, the same smile she once used to dismiss me. After all, isn't that what family does? Help each other. She flinched, hearing her own words turned back on her. Later that evening, I placed a bouquet of flowers on my grandfather's grave. The cool breeze carried a sense of closure. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered. Sometimes karma needs a little help. As I stood, my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria, another merger opportunity. My new life called, full of potential and promise. Eleanor and Rebecca thought they were stealing an inheritance. Instead, they gave me something far more valuable. The push to become the person I was always meant to be. They say karma finds everyone eventually, but sometimes she needs someone to open the door and show her where to strike. Hi, I'm Olivia Thompson, and 3 months ago, my sister-in-law Diana turned my life upside down. She showed up our doorstep with 3 oversized suitcases and a sob story about her failed marriage. What was supposed to be just a few days quickly spiraled into chaos, with my mother-in-law Margaret orchestrating a complete upheaval of my home, including demoting me to the unfinished basement so Diana could claim our master bedroom. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. From the moment I married Michael 2 years ago, Margaret and Diana made it clear I was an outsider. The help Diana once hissed to her friend at our wedding, thinking I couldn't hear. But Michael was different, supportive, loving, and quick to shut down their digs. At least he used to be. The night Diana arrived, mascara streaked down her cheeks as she collapsed dramatically into Michael's arms. Mark left me, she sobbed. He's been cheating for months. Michael shot me a pleading look, and I nodded. Of course we'd help. You can take the guest room, I offered, already grabbing fresh linens. But Diana's eyes flitted to our bedroom door, ajar just enough to reveal the king-size bed and bay windows I painstakingly decorated. The guest room. Margaret's voice crackled through Diana's phone on speaker. I hadn't realized she was listening. That tiny, dusty space? Absolutely not. Diana needs proper rest after her trauma. Mom, I don't want to impose, Diana murmured, though she made no move to object. Nonsense. Margaret snapped. Michael, your sister needs support. Olivia can make do elsewhere. She's young and adaptable. Isn't that right, dear? The way she said dear made my teeth grind. Before I could respond, Michael shifted uncomfortably. Maybe just for a few days, honey. Diana's really upset. And just like that, I lost my bedroom. Diana moved into the master suite, complete with a memory foam mattress I'd saved for months to buy. I ended up in the guest room, but Margaret wasn't finished. The next morning, she marched in with a contractor in tow. The guest room's air quality is atrocious, she announced, brandishing a device that looked suspiciously like a phone screensaver. Diana's allergies would flare up. We'll need to renovate. Olivia, you understand. And where am I supposed to sleep? I asked, watching my belongings get hauled out. Margaret's gaze slid to the basement door. There's plenty of space down there, just needs a little elbow grease. Think of it as a project, something to keep you busy. Michael started to object, but Diana burst into tears. I should have just gone to a hotel, she wailed. That sealed my fate. The basement was dark, damp and littered with old Christmas decorations and exposed pipes. It was ironic, really, my interior design business was thriving. Yet I found myself laying a cot between a water heater and a stack of dusty boxes. It's just temporary, Michael assured me. But as days turned into weeks, Deanna's recovery became a parade of wine nights and spa days. Funded, no doubt, by Mark's cheating money. The master bath became her personal vanity, while my toiletries were relegated to a rusty shelf near the basement sink. Margaret visited daily, her criticism wrapped in a sugary smile. "Olivia, dear, I noticed the upstairs windows could use a cleaning. Though I suppose you wouldn't know from down here. Or, I'm teaching Diana your lasagna recipe. She's such a natural. Poor thing needs something to keep her mind off things." The final straw came at Sunday dinner. Margaret arrived with a real estate agent in tow and announced, "We found the perfect condo for Diana, right in Olivia's office building." "Convenient, isn't it?" Diana chimed in, flashing a grin. "I can even help with your design business. Mom said you've been overwhelmed lately." I never said, I started, but Margaret waved me off. "We're all family, dear. Diana's been such a blessing already. She even redecorated your old bedroom. It looks stunning." I clenched my fork, picturing my carefully curated decor, now covered in Diana's chaotic Pinterest knockoffs. "Actually," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "my business isn't a family venture. And I don't need help." The room went silent. Margaret's smile tightened. "We'll discuss it later," she said, her tone icy. "Diana, show Olivia the paint samples you picked for the basement. Since you'll be staying longer, we should make it livable." Paint samples. For my basement exile. I stood abruptly, knocking over my water glass. "I need some air," I muttered, heading for the door. As I stepped outside, I heard Diana's theatrical whisper, "See, Mom? I told you she's been so unstable. Michael, we're just worried about her." I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, when my phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Lily lit up the screen. 911. "Pipe burst in my kitchen. Need your expertise ASAP." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "On my way," I typed back. Sometimes a crisis is exactly what you need, and Lily's kitchen wasn't the only thing I planned to fix. I pulled into Lily's driveway, my mind churning with frustration over Diana's latest move. Inside, the smell of damp wood hit me immediately. Her kitchen was a wreck, with water-stained cabinets and warped flooring. "It's bad," Lily admitted, grimacing as she handed me a coffee. "But you look worse." Spill. We settled into her living room, and the words poured out. Diana's melodrama, Margaret's constant interference, Michael's inability to stand up for me. By the end of my rant, Lily's face had gone from sympathetic to stone-cold furious. "So let me get this straight," she said, setting her mug down with deliberate precision. "Your sister-in-law moves in, takes over your bedroom, and now she's scheming to take over your business. And Michael's just letting this happen." "He's stuck in the middle," I said weakly, though even I didn't believe it anymore. "No, he's stuck under his mother's thumb," she shot back. Grabbing her phone, she started scrolling. "You remember Karen from college? She's a real estate lawyer now. And I think you need to hear what she has to say about tenant rights." "Tenant rights?" I repeated, confused. Lily fixed me with a knowing look. "You're on the deed, right? Equal ownership with Michael?" I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "Then legally, they can't push you out of your own bedroom. Diana doesn't have a single right to be there." For the next 2 hours, Lily, Karen, on speakerphone, and I formed a battle plan. Karen walked us through everything: property laws, business protections, even tenant agreements. By the time I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: empowered. The house was quiet when I returned. Upstairs, the flicker of the TV confirmed Diana was comfortably ensconced in my bedroom. Michael was snoring softly in his recliner, a half-empty beer on the table beside him. I stared at him for a long moment, debating. Then I made my decision. "Michael," I said, shaking his shoulder. He jolted awake, blinking groggily. "What's wrong?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Now." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Honey, can't this wait until morning?" "No, it can't. This stops tonight, Michael. Either Diana moves to the guest room, or I'm moving out and taking half the business accounts with me." That woke him up. "What? You can't." "I can. I spoke to a lawyer today. Funny thing about joint assets in a marriage, they're joint. I crossed my arms, forcing him to meet my gaze. I don't want to do this, but I will if you keep letting your family treat me like this. Michael stared at me, his expression shifting from confusion to guilt. I didn't realize, I knew things were tense, but… Tense? I interrupted, my voice rising. Michael, I'm sleeping in a basement next to the water heater while your sister throws wine parties in our bedroom. And now she's eyeing my business too. His face went pale. What are you talking about? Before I could respond, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Diana appeared in the doorway, wearing my silk robe and holding a glass of wine. Everything okay down here? She asked sweetly, though her tone was anything but. Actually, no, I said, standing. We're having a private conversation, Diana. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing Mom and I can't help with, she said, her voice dripping with Fox concern. Michael, you don't have to listen to this. I'll call Mom. No, Michael said, cutting her off. No more calling Mom. This is between us. For a moment, Diana's mask slipped, revealing pure rage. But she recovered quickly, pressing a hand to her chest. Michael, I can't believe you're taking her side. After everything I've been through. Enough, Michael said, his voice firm. Diana, you need to move to the guest room, tonight. Diana's eyes narrowed, her usual tears failing to materialize. Fine, she snapped. But don't think this is over. She stormed upstairs, slamming the door to my bedroom. Michael turned to me, his shoulders slumping. I've been an idiot, he admitted quietly. Yes, you have. I said that my tone was softer now. But you're starting to fix it. The rest of the night was spent moving my things back upstairs. As I hung my clothes in the closet, Michael stood in the doorway watching me. I'll call the locksmith in the morning, he said, and maybe we should look into counseling. I nodded, hope blooming in my chest. That's a good idea. For the first time in months, I slept in my own bed. But the battle wasn't over. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find Diana sitting in my chair, Margaret beside her with a folder full of papers. We need to talk business, Margaret said smoothly, her smile as sharp as a blade. Family business. I stood in the doorway of my office, taking in the scene. Diana was lounging in my chair, spinning lazily side to side as though she owned the place. Margaret stood beside her, a picture of calculated poise, her handbag dangling from her arm like a weapon. They didn't even have the decency to wait for me to arrive before staging their coup. Morning, I sat evenly, stepping inside and setting my coffee down. What's this? A hostile takeover. Margaret smiled thinly, sliding the stack of papers across the desk. Not hostile. Practical. We've drawn up some documents to restructure the company, make it more family inclusive. I picked up the papers and quickly skimmed them. My stomach turned. They wanted me to sign over 51% of my company, essentially giving them control of everything I'd built. You can't be serious, I said, my voice sharp as I dropped the papers back onto the desk. Serious as a heart attack, Diana said smugly, propping her chin on her hand. And you might want to reconsider. Mom's had a chat with the Hendersons. They're not too pleased with your recent behavior. My breath caught. The Hendersons' renovation project was my biggest account. If I lost it, it could tank my reputation. You've been talking to my clients? I asked, ice creeping into my tone. Blackmail is such an ugly word, Margaret said, her tone smooth, but sometimes it's necessary to protect the family's interests. After last night's little spectacle, you've left us no choice. I laughed bitterly. My spectacle? You mean exposing Diana's lies about her divorce? Diana shot forward in her chair, her smirk replaced by a glare. Watch it, Olivia. Things can get very messy for small business owners if the wrong people hear the wrong things. The office door swung open before I could reply. Karen walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, and Mark, Diana's ex-husband, followed close behind. Oh good, Karen said, her voice light. Everyone's here. Saves us the trouble of making this a two-act play. Diana shot up from the chair like it was on fire. Mark, what are you doing here? Filing fraud charges, he said flatly, his gaze locking onto Diana. You emptied our accounts, Diana. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Margaret stepped forward, her composure faltering for the first time. Now see here. Careful, Karen interjected smoothly, holding up her phone. I'd think twice about denying anything. Olivia has recordings of everything you just said. Threats, blackmail, defamation, all admissible in court. Diana's face went pale. You can't use those. I can, I said, cutting her off. Company policy. All business meetings are recorded. The acoustics in here are fantastic, by the way. Margaret sputtered, but Karen wasn't done. She slid 2 more papers onto the desk. This is a cease and desist order preventing either of you from contacting any of Thompson Design's clients. And if you so much as breathe in Olivia's direction without her consent, we'll file this restraining order too. Michael will never let you do this, Margaret hissed. You're tearing this family apart. Michael's voice came from behind her. No, Mom, you are. He stepped into the room, his expression grim. And Olivia isn't alone anymore. Diana's mask cracked completely. Mark, please, she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. This is all just a misunderstanding. Let me explain. Explain it to the court, Mark interrupted coldly. I'm done. Margaret's hands trembled as she clutched her handbag. You'll regret this, she snapped, her voice shaking with fury. Both of you. No, I said, my voice calm and steady. We won't. Now get out of my office. Margaret pulled Diana toward the door, but not before throwing one last venomous glare in my direction. This isn't over, she spat. I look forward to your next attempt, I replied, smiling coolly. It'll be fun to shut that down, too. Once the door closed behind them, the room felt lighter, like a storm had passed, leaving fresh air in its wake. Karen turned to me, a triumphant grin on her face. That went better than expected. Mark, thank you for coming. He nodded, his expression softening. It was the least I could do. I'm glad you're standing up to her. After they left, Michael pulled me into his arms. I am so sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. For everything, for not standing by you sooner. I looked up at him, my heart aching and hopeful at once. We'll fix it, I said. Together. The coming weeks saw a cascade of victories. Diana was charged with fraud, and Margaret's influence over Michael crumbled. The Hendersons, it turned out, had never even spoken to Margaret, and their project continued as planned. They even referred me to 3 new clients. Michael and I began couples counseling, untangling years of manipulation and rebuilding trust. Slowly, we found our way back to each other. 2 months later, as I sat in my home office, now a serene, productive space, I smiled at a text from Lily. Just saw Diana at Starbucks. She's a barista now. Karma's beautiful, isn't it? I laughed softly, setting my phone down. On my desk was a photo from our housewarming party, a celebration of a home free of toxic interference. Life isn't perfect, and family is complicated. But sometimes, standing your ground and fighting for yourself is the only way forward. And when you have people who truly love and support you, even the hardest battles are worth it. My name is Hannah Wilson, and right now, I'm staring at my business account. The balance, 0. Every dollar I've worked so hard to earn is gone. Jessica, my sister-in-law and trusted accountant, claims she borrowed the money. Her words, family helps family, echo in my mind as I refresh the banking app again, praying this is some kind of glitch. Let me rewind. 3 years ago, I launched Wilson Creative, a boutique marketing agency born from years of 80-hour work weeks and relentless ambition. It wasn't easy, but with sleepless nights and unwavering determination, I grew the agency into a thriving business with a team of 15. Then, 8 months ago, Jessica showed up at my door, her face streaked with mascara and desperation. She'd lost her accounting job and was drowning in bills. I just need a fresh start, she pleaded over dinner, her voice breaking. Hannah, you know how hard I worked to get my CPA license. Please just give me a chance. Mark, my husband, squeezed my hand. His eyes said it all. She's family. Help her. I hesitated. My gut screamed caution, but as I watched her sob into her pasta, listing her mounting debts and rent troubles, my heart overruled my instincts. Okay, I relented. You can start Monday as our accountant, but Jessica, this is more than a job to me. It's my dream. Please don't let me down. She hugged me tightly, almost too tightly. You won't regret this, I promise. Family takes care of family, right? At first, she was perfect. Jessica streamlined our accounts, organized payroll, and uncovered tax deductions I hadn't known existed. Clients praised our professionalism. Employees were relieved to have the finances running smoothly. For the first time, I felt I could focus on growing the agency instead of drowning in admin. But cracks started to show. Jessica began arriving late, citing traffic or vague appointments. She flaunted a new designer bag one week and a luxury car the next, dismissing it all as great deals. The books balanced, so I looked the other way. Until this morning. The call came from Dave, one of our largest clients. Hannah, there's a problem with our payment. Your invoice says we're overdue, but we sent it weeks ago. Confused, I promised to investigate. That's when I logged into our business account and my world collapsed. Zero balance. 3 years of hard work, every client payment, every employee paycheck, gone. Panicked, I called Jessica. She picked up immediately, her tone almost cheerful. Oh, that. Don't worry, I just moved some funds around. Family helps family, remember? I needed to borrow it for a bit. My breath caught. Borrow? Jessica, that's $350,000. That's not your money. Relax, Hannah, she said with an exasperated sigh. I'll pay it back eventually. Mark always said what's his is mine too. And since he's your husband. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage. When I tried calling back, my number was blocked. At the office, her desk was cleared out. On social media, she was posting from an airport lounge. Off on a new adventure. Sometimes you just have to leap. Hashtagless #new beginnings. Now I sit here in an office I built from nothing, trying to process the devastation. How do I tell my employees their paychecks might not come? How do I tell Marcus' sister just sabotage everything we've worked for? My phone buzzes with a text from my mother-in-law. Jessica told me everything. How could you drive her to this? Family should support each other, not hoard money like you do. I close my eyes, anger and heartbreak threatening to overwhelm me. This isn't just about money. It's about betrayal, trust, and fighting for what's right. I've built this business from the ground up, and I'm not about to let Jessica's selfishness destroy it. She may have emptied my accounts, but I'm not going down without a fight. My hands shook as I stepped into the police station that afternoon, every step feeling like an act of betrayal against Mark. But what choice did I have? As I sat across from Detective Roberts, laying out bank statements and transaction records, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. More angry messages from my in-laws. Mrs. Wilson, Detective Roberts said, scanning the documents, these transfers weren't random. Multiple small amounts moved through various accounts over months before the final withdrawal. This wasn't impulsive. It was methodical. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Just then, my phone lit up. Mark was calling. I'd avoided him all day, but I couldn't keep dodging forever. I need to take this, I said quietly, stepping into the hallway. Hannah, what the hell is going on? Mark's voice cracked with tension. Mom's calling me nonstop, saying you're out to ruin Jessica. And Jess sent me this text about borrowing money. She didn't borrow it, Mark. I interrupted, my voice cold but steady. She drained our business accounts. All of them. She stole $350,000 and disappeared. There was silence on the other end. When Mark finally spoke, his voice sounded strange, almost detached. There's got to be some mistake. Jess couldn't. Check her Instagram, Mark, I said, exhaustion lacing my tone. She's in Dubai. Another long pause, then maybe she's just regrouping. You know, she's been struggling since her divorce. We should talk to her, work this out as a family. Work it out? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mark, I have 15 employees waiting for paychecks. Clients who've already paid for campaigns we can't deliver. This isn't a misunderstanding or some family issue. It's theft. You're at the police station, aren't you? His voice turned cold, almost accusing. She's my sister, Hannah. My family. And I'm your wife, I snapped, tears stinging my eyes. This is our life she's destroying. That evening, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the remnants of everything I'd worked for. My employees had gone home, blissfully unaware that tomorrow might be our last day. My phone sat on my desk, the screen lighting up with missed calls and voicemails, each more accusatory than the last. Then my computer pinged, a new email. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Subject, a friendly reminder. Dear Hannah, by now, you've probably noticed the changes to the accounts. Don't panic. I've been planning this for months. Mark and I grew up sharing everything. But then you showed up with your rules and professional boundaries. So I made it my business to learn all about your company. your clients, your vulnerabilities. The money is just the beginning. Check your client contracts, specifically the ones I revised last month. You'll find some interesting changes to the payment terms. Oh, and those tax deductions I found. Let's just say the IRS might have some questions. Go to the police if you want, but remember, I have all your company's financial records. One wrong move, and I'll make sure the world knows about those creative accounting practices you use when starting out. Family helps family, right? XOXO, Jessica. I stared at the screen, my hands ice cold. Jessica hadn't just stolen money, she had laid traps everywhere, creating a web of sabotage that could ruin me even if I recovered the funds. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. Coming home late. Need time to think. Mom and Dad want a family meeting tomorrow to discuss this mess he created. A mess I've created. My jaw tightened. I opened my laptop, determined to document everything. Every transaction, every contract change, every manipulative message. If my family wouldn't stand by me, I'd have to protect myself. Just then, the office door creaked open. I glanced up to see Sarah, my assistant, standing in the doorway. Hannah, I stayed late to finish some filing, and I found something weird in last week's backups. You need to see this. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to her screen. A hidden folder of backed-up emails filled the monitor. Jessica created shadow accounts for every client, siphoning payments for months. But she made one critical mistake. She used the company's server for everything, thinking she'd erased it all. My heart pounded as we dug deeper. The emails revealed transactions to offshore accounts, exchanges with dubious consultants, and even a step-by-step plan to sabotage my company's reputation after her departure. But the most shocking discovery was a string of messages between Jessica and my mother-in-law, Helen, dated months earlier. Mom, it's all set up. Once I drain the accounts, we'll use Hannah's client list to launch our own agency. When the business fails, Mark will have no choice but to leave her. You were right, she's never been good enough for him. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just Jessica acting alone. Helen had been in on it from the start. The next morning, I walked into the family meeting at my in-laws' house with a folder of evidence in hand and my lawyer on speed dial. Mark sat at the table, his face lined with exhaustion. Helen, ever the matriarch, sat at the head of the table, exuding false concern, while my father-in-law, Thomas, scrolled on his phone. Well, Hannah, Helen began, her voice oozing fake sympathy. I hope you're here to apologize to Jessica. This vendetta of yours. I slammed the folder onto the table, cutting her off. Before you lecture me, he might want to read your own emails, Helen, the ones where you helped Jessica plan to ruin my business. The room fell silent. Helen's face went pale as Mark grabbed the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. Mom, what is this? He asked, his voice unsteady. Helen stammered, It's nothing, Mark. Just misunderstood conversations. Misunderstood. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a voicemail from Jessica. Listen to this. Jessica's voice filled the room, cold and calculated, as she detailed their plan to take over my client list and destroy my reputation. With every word, Mark's expression grew darker. I've already filed charges against Jessica, I said calmly. The police are especially interested in these emails, Helen. They show conspiracy and premeditation. You wouldn't dare, Helen hissed, her mask slipping. We're family. I stood, my voice steady. Family? Family doesn't steal someone's life's work. Family doesn't manipulate their own son to destroy his wife. Family stands together, not tears each other down. Thomas finally looked up from his phone, his face grim. Helen, what have you done? Everything unraveled after that. Thomas, a respected judge, was appalled by his wife and daughter's actions. He immediately froze the accounts Helen shared with Jessica, ensuring they couldn't access more funds. 2 weeks later, Jessica was arrested trying to enter Canada with luxury items, a forged passport, and a new identity. Thankfully, a significant portion of my company's money was still recoverable from accounts she hadn't fully drained. Helen faced her own reckoning. The scandal forced her to resign from her cherished charity boards, and Thomas filed for divorce, unable to forgive her betrayal. As for my business, we not only survived but thrived. Clients rallied around us when they learned the truth, and Sarah's discovery of the backups prevented Jessica's tampering from causing lasting damage. Mark and I had a long road ahead, The betrayal shook him deeply, and he moved out temporarily to process the fallout. But unlike his mother, he chose to stand with me, facing the truth over blind loyalty. Counseling helped us begin to rebuild the trust that Helen and Jessica had tried to shatter. 6 months later, I sat in my newly expanded office, watching my growing team work with purpose. The betrayal had taught me harsh lessons about trust, but it also revealed who truly had my back. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Just finished moving back in. Dinner tonight to celebrate your best quarter yet. I smiled, typing back, yes, and Mark, thank you for choosing us. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood or marriage. It's about the people who stand beside you when others try to tear you down. Jessica and Helen thought they could destroy me with their betrayal, but all they did was show me the true meaning of family.